Again, ladies and gentlemen, I am John Polt, your extraordinary MC. That was a typo where it said extraordinaire. That's Bad Andy. Give him a big hand. He's running the show here today for us. This is the 21st annual Satchmo Summerfest presented by Chevron, and this year, this legacy stage, it's gone through a few permutations of names. It was originally Satchmo Seminars, and then the Satchmo Symposium, and now it is the Satchmo Legacy Stage. And this year, it is in memory of Joni Berry, who was a dear friend of the festival through supporting it with her husband, Stephen Maitland-Lewis, who you've seen up here over the course of the weekend, and the Inez, Joseph K. and Inez Eichenbaum Foundation. So I asked, if you get a minute, try to take a look at there's a biography, kind of a little thumbnail of her life. She passed away in 2020, and she is sorely missed. This festival is made possible through the generosity of our sponsors, including Chevron. Give Chevron a hand for making this possible. We're all out at a festival. Also, the New Orleans Jazz Museum at the Mint. Give the Mint a big hand for hosting us. As I said, the Joseph and Inez Eichenbaum Foundation and Stephen Maitland-Lewis. Also, the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundations. Janice Folks, there she is right there. Give her a hand. Janice, thank you so much. And Richie and Vicky Norigian. Also, you can help support the festival by purchasing official festival merchandise like that gentleman has. I'm still looking at, I told you guys, you're moving around, try to get out of my sight lines. I'm looking for that shirt. And also, it's hot outside. Buy a cold beverage, and that supports this very stage amongst all the others. So I just want to say how thankful I am for you all being here this weekend. We've had a great time as we get back into, well, temporarily at least, into a somewhat more normal state of affairs. But keep your masks on. I get to take mine off because they said I'm handsome. Anyway, here our penultimate presentation this afternoon and for the 2021 Satchmo Summerfest is a conversation between Gwen Thompkins and Adonis Rose. Gwen Thompkins, you probably know as the host of Music Inside Out on WWNO locally and nationally. And she, for many years, was the senior editor of Weekend Edition with Scott Simon. I feel like I know that guy. He's been part of my life for so long. And he also likes dogs a lot. And I like dogs, so I like Scott Simon. Then she was the East Africa correspondent for NPR. She's a native of New Orleans. She moved back here in 2012 to start the show. The show is on hiatus at present as she's writing a book based on the over 100 interviews. She also is very dear to my heart because I wouldn't be standing in front of you today without Danny Barker, who 32 years ago got me a job on my last day of looking for a job. He just said to Nina Buck, "Tell George Buck to hire this young man from California." And he did, like 5 minutes later. And here I am, still here over 30 years later. She wrote the introduction to a new and expanded edition of Danny's autobiography, A Life in Jazz, published as part of the third volume in a series by the Historic New Orleans Collection. It's my great honor and pleasure to give you Gwen Thompkins. Do you want to take it from here? Because I think Adonis will be revealed through the interview.
I'll take it.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I'll just say, and here she is to interview Mr. Adonis Rose. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Woo, thank you, John. Oh, boy, it's a real pleasure to be back here at the Satchmo Fest stage. And this is exactly the thing that I really love doing most in life. And I'm so happy that you all are here. And I'm thrilled that Adonis Rose is here.
Thank you for having me.
I do have an introduction because I always have an introduction because I want everybody to know where we're going. And so I'm gonna lay it on you. All right. So in jazz and in nearly every other form of music, the drummer has the best seat in the house. Not only does the drummer see and drive most of what's happening on stage, but the drummer also sees the immediate effect of the music, especially the rhythm, on the audience. The drummer knows all. And that's one of the reasons why today is a special day over at the Satchmo Festival, because Adonis Rose is not only the artistic director of the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, he's a Grammy Award winner, he's not only a music educator, he's not only a New Orleans music and culture curator at Jazz Ascona in Switzerland, okay? He's not only a recording artist, and he's not only a former member of the Nicholas Payton Quintet, but he's a drummer. And he's a drummer from New Orleans, and that means a lot. So let's welcome Adonis Rose.
Right, thank you, thank you. That was awesome. I was about to ask, who you talking about?
It's amazing. People have to be reminded of what they've done in life. I've found that more and more. You know, you talk to somebody and they think that they've done nothing, and then you talk with them for 5 minutes longer and you realize they've done everything.
Yeah,
you know,
time flies.
So Mr. Rose, you grew up. Did you grow up in the 7th Ward here in New Orleans?
Yes, I'm from the St. Bernard housing projects.
Wow.
So I grew up on Senate Street, 1490 Senate.
And so, did you know Danny Barker? Did you ever meet Danny Barker, who John Polt
I never met him. I never met Danny Barker.
Yeah, because he lived on Sear Street, right?
Yep.
Not far from you.
Yep.
Wow.
He did.
Well, you're
Yes,
too
he did.
young.
I am pretty young. Relatively young. Just depends on who you're asking.
Oh, okay. All right. And so, were the drums your first instrument, or was there another life before the drums?
No. My grandfather was a drummer. My grandfather's name was Wilfred Severin. And my grandfather forced my dad, who is Vernon Severin, who's also a drummer, to get me started playing the drums when I was about 3 years old. My uncle's a bassist. His name is Chris Severin.
I was just about to ask you if Chris Severin was
Yeah,
your uncle.
my dad and Chris are brothers.
No way.
Yep.
He's great.
He is awesome.
Yeah.
So I started out playing my drum rudiments, the double stroke roll, literally at about 3 years old.
Gee.
And
Were you any good?
And no, I sucked and I did not want to do it. And you know, my dad was a Marine, and he was a drummer. So I mean, he had this really strict way of dealing with me, even at a very early age. So you know, he made, you know, an offer that I couldn't refuse. He was like, either you learn how to play or you move out. And I was like, well, I'm only 4 years old. So I had to do it. So
Wow.
yeah, I started out really early, but it really gave me an advantage because by the time I got out of elementary school, I played in a concert band at Phillips. I went to Phillips, and I was more advanced than all of the other students playing the drums at that time. So by the time I got to junior high school, I had pretty amazing skills as a snare drummer.
Wow. If you do say so yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's pretty great, though. I mean,
Yes.
feeling the pressure, the heat of your father's breath on the back of your
It
neck.
seems like when I went to sleep, even the heat was there. Couldn't get him off me.
And so, what kinds of music were you attracted to early on?
Well, I was attracted to all of the things that my father and my mother played in the house. But also, you know, I got a chance to see my grandfather play once at Dookie Chase. My grandparents' house, my dad's parents' house, was on Dumaine Street, which was right around the corner. So, you know, I would see my dad practice all the time and hear my uncle playing the bass all the time, and we lived next door to each other. So just everything, whether it was Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, you know, Marvin Gaye, Earth, Wind and Fire. I mean, my dad had literally hundreds of records, and he used to play music every day. So it was always there. So I had a little bit of everything. And then I love rap. You know, I came up in a generation when rap was becoming really popular.
What kind of rap?
All rap. All rap. You know, of course, you know, all of the early greats. You know, I loved, you know, Kool Mo D and LL Cool J. And then, you know, more gangster rap started to come into the picture. So, I mean, you know, we had Ice-T and people like that. But then NWA came. When NWA got on the scene, that changed everything in
How
rap.
so? How so?
Because it was directly dealing with things that were happening in black communities in a way that we had never heard before. Similar to, what jazz musicians do. So,
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really dealing with things in the community.
Talk more about the relationship between jazz and rap, or hip hop, however you define it. Mm-hmm.
Well, jazz was the first music to come along where you had people who were dealing with things through the music, whether it was racism, inequality. They also had a lot of romanticism in the music, but it was a music that spoke out. It was a way to have conversations about really difficult things without using words. Jelly Roll Morton, he played in brothels, and he had to improvise to what a lot of the dancers were doing when they had dancers in the brothels. So he had to improvise and play things to be able to create a show for the dancers. But he took that concept and that idea and recorded it and played it in around the world in nightclubs and theaters. But all musicians did that. But jazz is a music that really speaks to the heart of wherever we are as a nation. And I think rap is the same way. And at first, nobody really wanted to hear what jazz musicians were playing. It was the same thing with rap. I think early on, when hip hop and rap came along, it was easier to take it in because it wasn't as vulgar. When NWA came along, the language that they used, I think more people became focused on the bad words than the content of what they were actually talking about.
Right.
It was music that was talking about current events and what was really happening in black communities.
Yeah,
making people aware of that.
Yeah, it seems like as if in early jazz, in particular pre-civil rights movement, there was more of an effort to use double entendre, to obscure the bare naked fact of the reality of the musician's life and experience, and instead to sort of to note it in a more oblique way vocally, let's say. Yeah. And so, for instance, obviously there's in Ricky Riccardi's book, he talks about Louis Armstrong's letters, and he says that Armstrong would always refer to James Crow.
Right, exactly.
James,
exactly.
Yes.
Which derived from the minstrel shows.
Exactly, and all. But it's fascinating, and also it's it's interesting that you should mention that because that you would mention Jelly Roll Morton because. There came a time when jazz musicians did not want to be associated with the brothels,
right.
And for one reason or another. But sex has always been, part of jazz.
Absolutely.
And part of any American music form,
well,
really.
Yeah, sex is a good thing, and it's a beautiful thing. But to be able to demonstrate it musically, where you have all the subtleties and the beauty of being able to use melody and harmony to be able to depict physical situations. So a lot of times, musicians, music is the voice of the invisible. Wynton Marsalis says that all the time. And, just hearing it, it takes you to a place. Because the place where the music is coming from is all based on experiences.
Right.
It's not something that's separate from the person that's creating it. So yeah, sex it can be romanticized. It's beautiful, and you have to have a certain amount of that in music for people to be able to feel it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention Wynton Marsalis because I was just reading a book of essays of Whitney Bayliet, the old, the longtime New Yorker jazz critic. He passed away, but he was reviewing a Wynton Marsalis piece that ultimately won the Pulitzer Prize. Blood on the Fields, and he hated it. I mean, the man eviscerated the piece, right? He hated it, right? But then twice in the essay, he goes, "But Herlin Riley." was
right.
wonderful.
Right.
The drummer, Herlin Riley was wonderful. And he said, particularly his rim shots. And I thought to myself, that's Bourbon Street. Because Herlin Riley started off on Bourbon Street playing for a burlesque show. You know what I mean? And so he had to play the same rim shots, like, I don't know how many times a night.
Right,
You
but
know?
I mean, there's a whole lot more to Hurl and Riley's playing than rim shots.
Oh, good God.
And Blood
yes.
on the Fields, that recording itself and that work was so heavy. But when you think about Hurl and Riley and his contribution to the drum set, period, not only New Orleans drums. You know, Hurl and Riley was a drummer. He was one of the first drummers outside of James Black and my dad that I got a chance to spend a lot of time with.
Really?
I studied with Hurl and Riley for a few years.
Lucky you.
Oh, lucky me. Yes. You know, I used to really bother Hurlin all the time. He would be on the road with Winton. This was early on when he first started out, but he would go on tours with Winton, and I would literally, when he lived on Tennessee Street in the Lower Ninth Ward, I would show up after school at his house and sit on his front porch until he got home. And I would help him take his suitcases out of his van that he had at the time and help him bring his suitcases inside where he had some drums set up in his like laundry room. And he never ever turned me down. He could be gone for months and come back, and before he spent time with his family, he would give me drum lessons.
Wow.
I used to spend nights at his house. I became a part of the family.
Amazing.
With Hurl and his family. So to speak about Hurl and Riley and rim shots would be taking a whole lot away from his contribution to the music.
I think that's
understand
absolutely true.
it's a great compliment, but to, you know, when you're a drummer and you hear somebody compliment your rim shots, it's not really. So Hurl and Riley has a lot to do with the reason why I have a career. You know, because he was a drummer that taught me what it was like, what I needed to have to be a professional.
And as many of you probably already know, Hurl and Riley's grandfather played drums as well and played with Louis Armstrong in the Colored Waifs home. He didn't play professionally, but he was, a very prominent figure in his church in the Lower Ninth Ward, and and Hurl and Riley grew up in his grandfather's house.
Yep.
You know, which is an amazing story.
Yep.
And his grandfather said, "There's a rhythm to life. There's a rhythm to everything
Yep.
in life. Remember that."
Yep.
Okay,
The Lasty family.
The Lasty family.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about the rhythm to your life. All right. So you lived in New Orleans. You spent 10 years in Fort Worth. What brought you there? What kept you there? What made you leave?
Well, Hurricane Katrina was the reason why I went. And, you know, when I packed my bags, I thought I was only going to be gone for a few days. And it ended up being 10 years. And at the time, I was working with Harry Connick. I was touring with Harry Connick when the storm happened. So when I got to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I was still touring with Harry. I was, you know, staying in these apartments in Arlington, Texas, and I couldn't practice. And I didn't want to go out on the road with Harry and not practice. So I actually reached out to some of the musicians back here, and I spoke with Ed Peterson, who's, a great composer and saxophonist. I ended up talking with Ed and asking him if he knew anybody in Arlington, Texas, that could hook me up with a place to practice. So he knew the director of the jazz program at UT Arlington, and he put me in touch with him. The guy's name is Tim Ishii, and when I met with Tim Ishii, he let me use the school facilities to practice. After he found out who I was and what I was doing, and more about my career, he offered me a teaching position at the university. So I ended up teaching at UT Arlington for about 6.5 years. So I did that while I toured. So after I worked with Harry, I was still working with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, but then I was working with a lot of other artists like Nina Freelon. I played with her for 10 years, and just off and on with a lot of different bands. Kurt Elling, I spent some time with Kurt. So I started my own nonprofit organization and big band while I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
So it was Fort Worth Orchestra or something along those lines?
It was the Fort Worth Jazz Orchestra.
Jazz Orchestra.
Yeah, and I decided to do that actually when I relocated. When I was still on the road driving to Texas, I called Winton on the phone and I spoke to him. And I said, "Man, well, Winton, do you know anybody in Fort Worth, Texas?" He was like, "Man, I don't know anybody in Fort Worth, Texas." They used to have a club there called a Caravan of Dreams that I played some years ago. I played there with Terrence Blanchard. I played there. I was in Marcus Roberts' band, the pianist, for 2 years. So I played there with him. So I was familiar with the club. But Wynton was like, man, Caravan of Dreams closed down, so I don't know what they're doing out there. But he was like, look, I'm going to send you some money. So he wired money to my bank account. Wynton would always do things like that. There's a lot of, he's a very generous guy. When I was in college, I worked with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. I did one of the first tours. And Wynton gave me the opportunity to do that, and I worked with him doing quartet gigs. But anyway, I ended up being in Fort Worth. I started my own orchestra because I had worked with Jazz at Lincoln Center and been around Wynton so long, and also what was happening here with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra. So I figured, okay, if I'm going to be here a while, I might as well bring a little bit of New Orleans to Fort Worth. So I started the big band and ran that band for the 10 years that I was there.
And then what goosed you out of there?
A few things. My mom got sick. She had a stroke. And
Here in New Orleans?
Here in New Orleans, yep. And, you know, when your mom wants you to come home, you just pack up and come home. So I came home. I've been home since.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that's been, what, 2015 or so?
2015.
Gotcha. Well, we're lucky to have you back.
Well, it's good to be back.
Yes,
No
indeed.
place like home.
So when people talk about why New Orleans music is so memorable, they invariably want to talk about the rhythm. And, you know, and we in this audience can name 8 great New Orleans drummers between us, right? So we're talking Baby Dodds and Zutty Singleton and Earl Palmer and Vernell Fournier.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Ed Blackwell.
Ed Blackwell.
James Black.
Russell Batiste.
Yes.
Right? Bob French.
Bob
Thank
French,
you.
Ernie Ellie.
Exactly. Shannon Powell, Jason
Yes.
Marcellus, Herlin Riley. I mean,
Yes.
you know, it's just like it goes. You're just like naming presidents of the United States
Yes.
or something,
It's
right?
easy.
And Willie Green,
Willie.
Stan Moore,
Yep.
you know. So,
Yes.
but what keeps contemporary New Orleans drummers so relevant in jazz?
Johnny Vodakovich. Oh, absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Can't talk
Thank
about
you.
New Orleans drummers
Thank
without
you.
talking about Johnny Vodakovich.
Johnny Vodakovich.
Yes.
Man, that guy's got a feel, doesn't
Oh,
he?
he does.
Just
He
the
does.
perfect touch.
He does. He does. I've always loved Johnny's playing. But the thing that makes New Orleans drummers relevant, you know, we have a special thing, and it has everything to do with New Orleans, and that's the thing that cannot be easily duplicated by any other drummer, and it's really about the way we think about the drum set. You know, even starting with Baby Dodds, you know, we've always thought, and the music actually started that way. We've always thought about the drum set from the bottom of the drum kit up. You know, so when you think about early drummers like Baby Dodds, you know, to keep time playing the music, you know, in the early 1900s and the 20s, drummers kept time on the bass drum. That was the primary source of keeping time on the drum set. That was before the use of the ride cymbal.
And so now it's the ride cymbal that keeps time most of the
Primarily, unless you're, you know, playing traditional New Orleans music or you're dealing with a brass band.
So you start viscerally in the gut.
Yes, that's where it starts, on the street. But you know, for New Orleans drummers, just psychologically, it's embedded within us and in the community, because the people, we feel the beat from the bottom up. Who wants to hear a brass band with no bass drum in it? So that's the way we think about music. But when you think about when the ride cymbal came into existence, which was more in the 30s by Kenny Clark was the drummer who was giving credit for the innovation of the ride cymbal. When a ride cymbal came in, primarily the music was dance music before the late 30s, early 40s. And when a ride cymbal came in, people stopped dancing to the music a lot of times. So New Orleans drummers, Kenny Clark was from Pittsburgh,
right?
Pittsburgh,
Yeah,
I think. He was from Pittsburgh, but that changed the music, which influenced all of the drummers after that. But when you look at the drummers before that, those are the drummers that we were influenced by. And that never goes away, because brass bands never go away.
Right.
Shannon Powell was still around, and Bob French was still around, and all those drummers, Ed Blackwell, you know, all those, you know, Earl Palmer, they still played the drum set, and they approach the drum set from the bottom up. So that's the way we hear the drum set naturally. And I remember I went to Berkeley. I went to Berkeley College of Music, and when I got there, I was already on tour. You know, I had worked with Betty Carter. I was on the road with Terrence Blanchard and working with some other people in New York. But drummers used to always ask me, even in New York, well, man, you play the bass drum, like sometimes you play it really loud. You know what I mean? You just play the bass drum loud. And I was like, well, I'm from New Orleans.
Yeah.
That's just the way I think about the drum set. So we're relevant because what we do is special.
Yeah, I tell you, I saw a documentary once where a bass drummer for a brass band said, "If you are loud, you are loved."
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, when you're playing on the streets.
Yes.
When you're playing on the streets, absolutely. I mean, so for us, not only that, you know, just the innovation of the drum set and what New Orleans drummers, what their contribution was to that. The drum set is really one of the only instruments that was actually innovated and created in the United States.
Right.
That is the one instrument that we can take credit for. It went from John Sousa's marching band, and there was a drummer, his name was D.D. Chandler, Edward D.D. Chandler, who went from playing in brass bands to actually come up with the idea to create his own foot pedal for the drum kit. And he was the first person to take a bass drum from the brass band and a snare drum and use it as a drum kit. That was innovated in New Orleans by a New Orleans drummer.
Like Reese's candy. You put your chocolate in my peanut butter.
Exactly.
You put your peanut butter in my chocolate.
Exactly, and that's the way it happened. That's the way it happened. So there's no way of getting around New Orleans drummers and innovation when it comes to the music. So you take that, you take Baby Dodds, you take Zutty, Singleton. Big Sid was not from New Orleans, but he played with Louis Armstrong and a lot of the New Orleans greats. But you take Vernell Fournier and you take Ed Blackwell. Those guys were innovators on the drum kit. And they've done things. I mean, you take Zigaboo Montaliste.
Right.
And what he did, he changed the face of drum set playing altogether and still plays that way now. I talked to him a few months ago. But his style was so innovative. I mean,
what did he do?
Well, the way
Zigaboo
he...
Montaliste, of course, was the drummer for the Meters. The original lineup of the Meters, fantastic drummer. The man knows funk like nobody knows funk.
Oh, absolutely.
Please, so what? But can you beat off what he did? That's
Well, it's the way he displaced rhythms, and his the way he heard the drum set was according to the same things that I'm saying now. So he had all of those attributes. You know, of a New Orleans musician and New Orleans drummers. So when you think about Zigaboo Montaliste, you think about the evolution of the music. You go from Baby Dodds again, Zutty, Singleton, but then you move down to bebop, and then you had Big Sid, who was actually one of the drummers who was able to change his playing along with the times. But when you look at how the music grew and how it eventually rock and roll came out of the blues,
Right.
and how drummers played then, and then you think about you know, drummers who played in James Brown's band. But then you take that, you take James Brown's music and you look at the Meters music, and then you look at rhythmic what was happening rhythmically, and then you can start to hear the difference. So with Zigaboo, it was about displacement of rhythm.
displacement.
The way he would play something that was off time, that was a little bit slower than where it should have been.
Can you suggest? All right, let's say we're singing "Happy Birthday" and he's playing drums. Okay, so where would the drum hit?
It's a little bit hard to explain in that way, but it's like, just imagine, it's kind of like the same thing that brought jazz drumming into the music. You know, you take a military march,
Okay.
which is a real kind of straight march, but then you take a march the way a New Orleans drummer would play it.
Okay.
Boom, zazz, 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 boom, zazz, zazz, zazz. You know, so when you look at how it evolved in that way, Zigaboo was one of the drummers who just took a regular 2 and 4 funk beat, and the way he interpreted it, because he was a New Orleans drummer, and we're so used to dancing. I mean, a lot of New Orleans drummers can actually dance. And if you ever see somebody do a second line versus somebody who doesn't really know how to do second line dancing, that would be a good way to understand Zigaboo versus somebody who's not a New Orleans funk drummer, and his contribution to funk drumming and New Orleans drumming.
And so, you know, you mentioned Kenny Clark earlier, who was a game, you know, who created a sort of a sea change in how younger generations of drummers approached music and all. You know, are you saying through the, you know, I mean, through the, you know, the lens of history that America stopped wanting to dance?
Not necessarily. I mean, during the time when Kenny Clark came, actually, Kenny Clark got fired. I think he playing with Fletcher Henry? He was playing with one of the big bands, but at that time, everybody was still dancing to the music. And Kenny Clark, I think the band leader wanted to play a song that was too fast for him to play on a bass drum. So instead of keeping time on a bass drum, he kept time on the cymbal. And when he did that, the people who were dancing was like, okay, well, what's going on? Where is the bass drum? And then the band leader fired him. He actually got fired for innovating, keeping time on a ride cymbal.
Wow.
So at that time, people were still dancing to the music. The Lindy Hop was around. You know, those things were still happening.
I don't think people were Lindy hopping in. Oh, well,
In the
actually, with
30s.
Fletcher Henderson,
In
yeah,
the
yeah,
30s.
during those times, yeah.
And then the big band era came in not long after that. But no, people were still dancing, and I think people still dance to the music now. And you have a ride cymbal in place. People, you know, it takes a while for people to get used to something that's different. So it was just a matter of just transitioning. And then when the bebop era came in, which Kenny Clark had a lot to do with, you know, he played a lot. He played in a house band at Minton's with Dizzy Gillespie. He was in Dizzy's in Charlie Parker's band.
And Minton's, of course, was the club in Harlem that was such an incubator for
Absolutely. That's where all the jam sessions
contemporary
happened.
jazz.
Oh, yeah, and that's where Dizzy and Bird crafted bebop. You know, so Kenny Clark was a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Also.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if I answered the question or not, but
Well, you
it just
got
took people a
close.
while to get. It took people a while to get used to the ride cymbal, being the primary timekeeper on the drum set.
Yeah.
But people still dance to it.
But what's interesting is that, you know, I mean, jazz musicians, many of them tend to be wonderful teachers like yourself, you know. And so what I often hear from musicians here in New Orleans is, oh, I'm on my way to so-and-so place because I'm teaching these kids about rhythm. I'm teaching these kids about how to play in a way that makes people want to dance, you know. I'm going to Juilliard. I'm going to Illinois. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to all these places, you know. You know, I mean, but is there some, you know, I mean, and you alluded to this before, is there some aspect that cannot be taught? Is there some aspect that you can't bridge?
Yeah.
Dang.
A lot of it. I mean, you can teach somebody how to make gumbo, but I mean, I want my mama's gumbo. Somebody that's not from New Orleans. I mean, you know, we've all traveled to places where people have gumbo on the menu, and they could actually really follow the recipe line by line of what Emerald put in the book, but there's still something missing. Like, my mom does not measure how much salt she's putting into her food. She just knows how to do it, and she picks it up with her fingers and just sprinkle. I'm like, okay, well, how do you know how much to use? And she doesn't even taste the food.
Right.
And she knows how it's going to come out. It's the same thing.
Well, okay, so that either makes New Orleans drummers at a premium because they're the only ones who really get it, or it spells the end, you know what I mean, of dance music as we know it. You know what I mean, not you know what I mean, not too far from now. You know, what do you think? Is it both?
I think we'll always be relevant, and we're always at the forefront of the music and leading the way. And it doesn't just have to be, I mean, all New Orleans musicians, rappers, dancers, visual artists, we lead the way. And people look to New Orleans for innovation. You know, in my opinion, what Lil Wayne did for the rap game, he totally changed the way people thought about rap music because of his use of rhythm.
Okay, name your top three, Lil Wayne.
Oh, man, it's just so many of them. I don't know. I have all of his records. It's hard. It's like saying name a top three for Tupac. I interviewed his sister last week for my show, and I asked her the same thing. It's just difficult to do.
Okay.
But the same thing with Mystical. Mystical was really the rapper who I felt as a drummer really was able to change the game just in terms of how rappers use rhythm.
Well, it seems as if, I mean, I can't say that I'm as well versed on hip hop as you, but I mean, Mystical seemed to be an artist who understood the importance of dance in music.
Well, a lot of those guys
And
actually
humor.
played. They actually played in marching bands. You know, I played in marching bands. A lot of rappers, musicians, Manny Fresh, you know, all of those guys played, you know, in a marching band. So that influenced everything that they did. In New Orleans, you can't separate the culture, any part of the culture. So if you're a drummer, chances are that you probably can dance and you eat red beans and rice every Monday. If you're a rapper, you're doing the same thing.
Well, that's true, and in fact, you know, what I mean, but you know, New Orleans, I think, above all else, brings, well, not above all else, but along with everything else, brings humor.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so, you know, in jazz, in hip hop, in rock and roll, in R&B, in, you know what I mean, in bounce,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's like always that element of joy and humor.
Yeah.
Not joy like, we're so happy we have no problems, but joy in the sense of like, isn't this great what we're doing? And
Well,
can't
yeah.
we do it
Well,
all day?
it's kind of like the blues.
Yeah.
You know, the blues came from a very dark place, but the thing that made the blues special is that people were able to use it to as a way to heal themselves from all of the hurt and pain that they were dealing with. So joy came out of the pain. And that's what New Orleans music is. You know, when you think about it, you know, we can play you know, in a brass band at a party, but then we can leave 2 hours later and play at a funeral.
Right.
We can, you know, so it's you cannot separate the culture. It's all together. But as you know, in our culture, we celebrate people when they leave.
Right.
You know, so I mean, we're heartbroken. We're like, okay, well, we're sad you're gone, but we're gonna party like hell for you today.
Exactly.
We're gonna celebrate you right now. So, but you can use the music for a lot of different things, and it's always happy a lot of times. Even if you're playing St. James Infirmary or just A Closer Walk with Thee, people sing those songs and get a lot of comfort out of it.
You know, many years ago, I went to I went to the hometown of President Obama's stepmother, who recently died. And it's this really beautiful area of Kenya. It looks like a landscape painting, you know, just farms and beautiful trees and lakes and all this sort of thing. And the people who live there, it's in what's called Luo land. That's the tribe, you know. And in Kenya, in that area, they say that no one, there are 40 some odd tribes in Kenya or more, and that many languages. But everyone said of the Luo, only the Luo know how to laud a man. So, for instance, so when he, you know, so he wasn't even coming, but I think it was an election. It was his first election, as president. And I mean, the people broke off laurel leaves from the trees. They killed a bull. They, you know what I mean? They danced and partied for, you know what I mean, for days. You know what I mean? In a way that in other areas of the country you didn't see that kind of. That kind of celebration, not just for him, but for anybody. And so I felt very much at home, I have to say,
Yeah,
in that little area.
Absolutely.
Because everybody was having a real good time.
Yeah. I mean, you can go to Kermit's on Sunday and you'll probably be roasting a pig outside. You know what I mean?
That's very true.
But we have our own thing. We have our own way of speaking. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be Wynton Marsalis or Harry Connick. You can tell it from New Orleans. We have our own way of doing things, and that's what makes us special, and that's what keeps us relevant.
Talk a little bit about being a big band leader. You're the artistic director of the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, and I mean, you know, this is, you know, even though probably there are 20 big bands that fail to every one that succeeds. It's like such a great club to be in. you know, because you're, like you mentioned Fletcher Henderson before, you know, there's Duke Ellington, there's Count Basie, everybody wants to see another arise, you know. And so talk a little bit about the, you see, you've been artistic director since 2017, you know, I mean, about the challenges of you know, I mean, of running a big band.
Well, in my particular case, in this situation, it's a lot more than just a big band. You know, it's really about being able to run a nonprofit organization. You know, and the nonprofit is what operates the New Orleans jazz market, and it also operates the orchestra. So, you know, there's a lot more involved than just preparing some music, doing some arrangements, writing some music, rehearsing, and just doing concerts.
Well,
you know.
I mean, you say just, but I mean, that's what that's what Duke Ellington devoted his life to.
Yeah, well,
and it wasn't a
I'm
bad
just saying,
life. It was a great life.
In my case, Wynton Marsalis's situation was different, much different than what Duke Ellington's was. Even though they had a lot of challenges, and Duke Ellington led the way and made it possible for Wynton Marsalis. What Wynton has to do on a day-to-day basis is a little bit different than what the Clayton Hamilton Big Band has to do.
And you're more, and your experience is more in that vein.
My organization is modeled, the only other organization in the country modeled exactly the way Jazz at Lincoln Center is, primarily being that we're the only jazz orchestra to ever build a performing arts center for jazz, solely for jazz. Jazz at Lincoln Center is the only other orchestra to do that. They were the first.
And yours is, of course, on Aretha Castle Haley.
Yep.
A fantastic venue if you ever get a chance. I mean, many of you probably have already been, but it is absolutely stunningly beautiful. Go ahead.
Yeah, so actually the musical part of the organization and running the big band is the easy part. It's all of the other things.
The education, the community
education,
outreach.
trying to find out, you know, we're going through a pandemic, so our building was closed for 16 months. So we have a board of directors that we have to work with to try to, you know, resolve problems that arise all the time, whether it's, you know, paying bills, dealing with debt, keeping the building open, trying to hire staff, pay people, just a lot of things that comes along with it. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's been a great learning experience for me. But running the band and dealing with things musically is the best part of the job.
That I would believe.
Yeah.
And in recent years, you've had all kinds of support from guest artists, you know, Sheila E., Dee Dee Bridgewater, Ladisi, and others, and which of course are crowd pleasers. You know what I mean? This is what helps getting people into the door.
Yeah.
But does it also help the morale of the band, of the orchestra?
Well, absolutely, because Sheila E., when I spoke to her on the phone before she came here, I spoke to her, and she told me that the last time she performed in New Orleans was in 1985 with Prince.
Whoa.
You know, so who else would have had the opportunity to perform with her in New Orleans unless she was here with Prince in 1985 or did something in between? So I also found out from her that her mother is a New Orleanian.
No way.
Yes, and her mom came to the show with 30 of her family members, and they didn't fly in from anywhere. They were all here already.
That's amazing.
So
I did not know that.
For my band to be able to experience performing with Sheila E. was special to the people who attended the concert in New Orleans. To see Sheila E. with our band, it was special. Same thing with Ledisi. She's also from New Orleans. Her mother lives here. She moved out to Oakland some years ago, but when I spoke to her on the phone, she said, well, look, you know, I normally don't come to New Orleans and, you know, perform with a jazz band or an orchestra, so I'm a little bit uncomfortable, you know, performing this music in front of people in my hometown. You know, that was special for the guys in the band, because when would they ever get a chance to work with Ledisi unless she hires them for her band?
Well, you know, at the same time, though, you mentioned, you alluded to this before, when you were with, you've been with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra for some time, but also part of other endeavors and all. And so, unlike the band leaders of the past who pretty much had their musicians full time, you, as the head of Nojo, you know what I mean, are in some way sort of competing with, you know what I mean, the other interests of your musicians. How do you handle that?
I don't really look at it as being that I'm competing with the interests of my musicians. You know, my job is to create opportunities for my musicians. You know, so we work hand in hand. You know, we don't have an organization without them. You know, so, you know, the musicians in my band, you know, we have 18 musicians in a band, and those musicians make up a huge part of what's happening on the scene, the New Orleans music scene. And they have to work. They have to perform and do things outside of the orchestra, obviously, because we're not on the road traveling all the time, and we don't have the money yet to be able to put them on salaries and hire them for, you know, full time. But we're all working together to be successful. You know, we just recorded a new project with Sorrel Amy, the French vocalist who moved to New Orleans.
Yes, yes, she's wonderful.
So
she
we-
played recently at the Jazz and Heritage Foundation.
So we have a new record coming out in September featuring
Wonderful.
her
With the New
orchestra.
Orleans Jazz Orchestra.
Yes.
Oh, that's really something to look forward to.
Yeah, and we're already booking tour dates for next year. So, you know, for me, I'm always looking for projects, interesting projects to do, interesting artists to collaborate with, and again, interesting ways to create opportunities for the members of my band.
Did she win the Sarah Vaughan International Jazz
She
Vocalist
did.
Competition?
Yes, she did.
Yeah, wow, she's really something.
She is awesome.
And then last year, during the pandemic, was it during the pandemic that you released your first live album? Not with the orchestra, but
Right.
on your own.
That's right. That's right. I released a recording called Peace of Mind.
Peace of
It was
Mind.
done live at the Blue Llama Jazz Club in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
And so, I mean, what was the impetus behind this? I see it as a concept album. Am I wrong?
No, it definitely a concept album. I wanted
What's
to
your
do-
concept?
Exactly. I wanted to do music by some of my favorite New Orleans musicians, and you know, one of those musicians was Idris Muhammad, who we hadn't mentioned, who was an amazing New
yes.
Orleans drummer. I did one of the tunes that he recorded on one of his albums entitled Peace of Mind. It was written by Bob James, but I recorded that in tribute to Idris. I also did a song by Ellis Marcellus on the record. So that's really what it was about. It was about doing some of my favorite music by some of my favorite artists, and to do a live record, which I had never done before as a leader.
Okay, well, we only have a few minutes left, and this is Satchmo Fest.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you, we've been talking about, before our conversation, we've been texting each other about drummers for Louis Armstrong during, Louis Armstrong's career. And so we're talking about three of them. We only have time really to talk about one, and I'm going to give you the choice, all right? All right, we can talk about Baby Dodds. I got music for Baby Dodds. We could talk about Zutty Singleton. I got music for Zutty Singleton, all right? And then we can talk about Big Sid Catlett. I got music for Big Sid.
Yeah, I would say we can talk about Baby Dodds, because he was the one that led the way for the other two drummers.
So he was in the Hot Five.
Yes.
Born in 1898, New Orleans. Okay.
I think he was born outside of New Orleans, but ended up coming back to New Orleans.
No, well,
If-
maybe so.
Yeah, but a lot of the guys, moved into town. But
I think Zutty Singleton was from outside Louisiana. I think he's from like Bunkie or something like that.
that's about
but I
right.
think Baby Dodds might be from here.
yep.
Yeah.
And you're on 49. Where's Bunkie? Off 49 somewhere? Yep,
You-
it's off 49
Google,
if you're going to
yeah.
Shreveport. You can see the sign. I remember the sign, Bunkie. But no, Baby Dodds, he was the first great drum set soloist. He was a guy who, again, was influenced by guys like Dee Dee Chandler, or he wouldn't have been playing the drum set. But he was the guy who really modernized the drum kit and took it to another level.
Okay, I have Baby Dodds with King Oliver
Yep.
and Louis Armstrong doing Weatherbird Greg.
Yeah.
Or I have, this is for your selection,
Uh-huh.
I have Baby Dodds Spooky Drums 1 and 2.
Uh-huh.
Your choice,
Well,
sir.
we could. I think we can do Spooky Drums. I mean, Spooky Drums. It's actually Baby Dodd speaking, and he's doing some drum examples, and somebody's interviewing him, and he's actually talking about how he approached the music in King Oliver's band, and also I think in Bunk Johnson's band, and Louis Armstrong's band, and he gives examples of how he approached the music in all of those bands. So I think.
You want to try that one?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's talking on this one, but
Is he not? Okay.
He might not be, but
All
but so you want one or two?
Well, let's do one.
One, okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Okay, I'm going to pause it. What do you hear as a drummer that we need to be listening to for?
Well, for me, I hear innovation, because one, he was doing his own recordings, and two, he's actually playing a drum solo. And when you think about the era of music at the time that he was playing, that was just not happening. This was done later, but that's an example of the way he played the drum set. He had wood blocks. He had 3 or 4 cowbells. And I'm sure you guys could hear how he was keeping time with the bass drum. That's what he did his entire career. And that's special to me. Even with Zutty, he has a recording that he made that was very similar. I think the name of the recording was entitled Drum Faces, or Drum Face or something like that.
Steak Face.
It was very
And Boff Boff. There was another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So he was just an innovative drummer, and just to think about what he did for the drum set, his contribution to the drum set, that's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to hear a little bit more
Melody.
of Baby Dodds?
Yeah,
All
and
right.
we can
We
listen to
wanna hear a
Baby
little
Dodds
bit more.
all
All
day.
right.
But it sounds familiar, right? It's relevant now.
Can you do
This
this?
style of playing, it's Baby Dodds. I can try. It's special because it has a form, and he's actually dealing with melodic ideas, and he's playing them, in a way that can be understood by the listener. And it's not just some random drum solo. It's something that's well thought out, and his placement of the rhythms. It's very hard to move from the drum kit to a wood block and to be able to have the same type of intensity. But for him, you don't lose any of the intensity when he goes to something else.
Right.
It still feels the same, but it adds different texture to what's happening.
Right, the dynamics.
But just innovative in every way when it comes to thinking about the drum set and being a soloist on the drum kit that early on, because Baby Dodds was there. We're not talking about Max Roach. We're talking about Baby Dodds, who was the premier drummer in the 20s.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to us. You've just
Thank
been
you for
great.
having me. Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adonis
you.
Rose.
Thank you.
Good luck on all of your endeavors.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Real pleasure.
Also, a big